The Pacers win a game against a good team, and their rookies score 65 points. It's about as good of a night as the Pacers could have at this point of their season. We're going to talk about it all on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and the Westside Community News. And today, we're talking about a very, very fun Pacers win. 65 combined points from Pacers rookies as they beat the Clippers at home without so many key guys. Isaiah Jackson, easily the best game of his career. He's merited 2 straight podcasts of full segments. We'll talk about him in this show. Dwayne Washington was great. Career game for Terry Taylor. Duarte put it together in the fourth despite a mostly sloppy game from him. Good contributions from basically every single player that played for the Pacers in this game. It was a complete win. We'll talk about the game, talk about Isaiah Jackson's big night and what it could mean going forward. And then at the end, 31 combined points from the two-way guys today, Dwayne Washington and Terry Taylor. I want to talk about those two guys, their futures, and if the Pacers might have to consider some contract changes with them because people have been asking how they can be kept long-term because two-way contracts are confusing. Let's talk about the game first. Pacers beat the Clippers 122-116. Impressive win from this Pacers team. They scored 30 or more points in 3 different quarters to game. Didn't really stink it up in any quarter. Their defense wasn't awesome. They gave up 116 again. You know, if you listen to yesterday's show, you know how terrible the Pacers defense has been this entire month of January, but their offense was wonderful. They shot almost 50% from 3 in this game. They shot well from 2-point range. Despite not getting to the line very much, they didn't turn it over that often. They got 11 offensive rebounds. So really every stat outside of getting to the line that they would want to focus on with the guys they had available, they did a good job in, and that's kind of interesting given how this Pacers game was shaking out to be. We learned earlier today, and I'll talk about something interesting with this at the end, that Domantas Sabonis has entered health and safety protocols. It sounds like, although it's not confirmed from Carlisle, that he mentioned the 6-day timing, which is true if you test positive. So if it's a false positive, perhaps he could be back sooner, but it sounds like he'll be out for 6 days and miss the next couple games for this Pacers team. So that meant he was out along with Turner, along with Brogdon, along with McConnell, along with Warren. And then O'Shea Brissett right before this game. Turns out he hurt his ankle, but Tadej still has this sore foot. Our pregame media was just Rick Carlisle bouncing injury thoughts off of us. So it was a lot of injuries and guys out, which meant, Isaiah Jackson gets his first career start. It was him and Duarte's probably their biggest overlapping minutes game of the season. Terry Taylor was in the rotation. Every healthy guy played. Kiefer Sykes played at the end of the second quarter. They needed so many rookies to play. They needed a ton of reserves to play because all those guys were out, and that didn't seem to be a problem for the Pacers in this game, despite all those hurdles. Isaiah Jackson was the story of this game. He'll get a whole segment for this. 26 points in his first ever NBA start. 19 shots. He hits 12 of them. That's a team high. His jumping and leaping ability was just unbelievable in this game. The lob threat, the vertical spacing allowed Lance Stephenson and Karis LeVert, the point guards, to have field days passing him the ball. LeVert, 9 assists in this game, multiple lobs to Jackson on his own. He put it together in the fourth quarter passing. Jackson hit a pull-up 3. His form looks good. 4 offensive rebounds, 2 blocks, 1 steal. MVP of the team in this game. To me, he was excellent in the starting center role. And the biggest thing, maybe not the number one biggest thing, but pretty close for me, 0 fouls for Isaiah Jackson, a very foul-happy guy. And he talked about after the game how part of, I don't want to spend too much on him because he's getting a whole segment, but part of what made him feel like he played such a good game is he didn't second jump and foul guys and was too leapy on the perimeter. He really held his own on both ends of the floor. He looked fantastic, and part of the reason he did is, like I said, with Karis LeVert, 9 assists from LeVert. LeVert didn't look like he was in line for a big game, but he really put it together with a solid fourth quarter where he had 3 assists, got his shooting percentage up to 50%. Just in the fourth, so he finished with 17, 7, and 9, a near triple-double for him. So despite some clunky turnovers, LeVert had a very nice game as the starting point guard. And the rest of the starters were just kind of okay. Justin Holiday shot well from 3, but Torrey Craig, unmemorable night pulling up for too many long twos. One of Chris Duarte's weirdest games of the season for the first 3 quarters. His burst wasn't there. He had this layup that he barely got over the rim on a fast break where he looked really sluggish. So he didn't play awesome or anything, but he had some nice defensive moments in the fourth quarter. So that unit ended up looking good together. By the end of the game, they all ended up filling a role very nicely. So impressive work by those guys to get it done with so many key starters out. LeVert was the only starter from the normal group who was playing in this game, and he really brought it home for the Pacers late when it got close. The Clippers cut it to 3 in the fourth, but the Pacers were able to figure it out on both ends, offensively and defensively, with that starting unit to get this one done. And off the bench, every single guy of the Pacers reserves, but like they had no starters, right? So the guys who come off the bench in this game for the Pacers are really like your third stringers in theory. They all played very well. They all played exactly how you'd expect them to play in the best case scenario, right? Jeremy Lamb hits half of his threes, grabs 6 boards, so he wasn't useless on defense in this game. So he has 9 points on efficient shooting. He was a +8. Terry Taylor, the two-way forward, he's 6'5", and he was the backup center in this game. I'll talk about him at the end. He deserves some more love than I gave him yesterday for a performance like this. 7 for 11 for Terry Taylor. 5 offensive rebounds. Nearly half of the Pacers' offensive rebounds on his way to 8 total. 15 points. Very much a career night for him, considering that he hadn't played that much in a game in his career before. He'd only played more than 10 minutes once ever. It was his highest scoring game. It was his highest rebounding game. He filled the role extremely well off the bench. His first meaningful minutes looking like a good rookie. Dwayne Washington stunk it up for the first 3 quarters and then scored 14 in the fourth, including a ridiculous heat check 3, followed by a shimmy. He finished with 16, his second consecutive big game after he had 20-something against Dallas on Saturday. And Lance Stephenson was huge for the Pacers in the fourth quarter. They were down going into the fourth. The Pacers were. Lance comes in, and their first 9 points of the fourth, Lance either scores or assists on them. He had 10 points and 4 assists and was a big +5 for them. So every bench player did well. All the starters filled their roles ably, and a bunch of young guys stepped up in roles that they don't typically fill. Isaiah Jackson, not normally the starting center, he did very well there. And, of course, Terry Taylor off the bench did well in that role. Jeremy Lamb was playing the 3, even the 4 a tiny bit, given who they had available. He did well. Torrey Craig played center for a couple possessions in this game. As a forward, he's not used to that. Everybody had to slide up and around, given who was available, and they all did a very, very good job of doing it. It was a really impressive game for everybody. It could have been ended up looking like a weird game, right? This game was not trending to be a good takeaway Pacers performance. It started off really clunky, and the Pacers were only up 5 at halftime and losing after 3, and there was a lot of zone and some gross turnovers. I mean, they didn't end up with a lot of turnovers, but some gross ones. So credit to the Pacers and their young guys for really turning it around and putting together a solid fourth quarter. Something this team has not done a lot this season is come and win a game after trailing after 3 quarters. So some impressive resilience from this team in this game to get it done. And the lineups, the weird lineups, the rookies playing, I mean, all stuff that doesn't typically happen, but Carlisle and the guys, they found a way to get it done. It was an impressive win in front of the home crowd, and one they can, in theory, build off of with the young guys. You know, with the vets, who knows who's going to be on the team in 10 days and where this team is headed, but the young guys who could, in theory, be around for longer, this is a game to build off of for this Pacers team going forward. The big news of the day before the game was Domantas Sabonis entering health and safety protocols. I mentioned earlier he could be out for some time, and this doesn't merit a full segment, but I did want to talk about it. The reason I think that is a little bit important for the Pacers is if he's out for the next couple of games, that could actually help the Pacers keeping Lance Stephenson quite a bit. Lance Stephenson's 10-day deal that he's on right now expires on the 2nd after they play the Magic on Wednesday. And the Pacers can't sign him to another standard 10-day deal, but they can always sign him to a hardship 10-day deal. So as long as Sabonis is in health and safety protocols come Wednesday, the Pacers could give Lance that deal and be able to keep him through the trade deadline much easier than they would have in other ways and still have an open roster spot to make trades. If Sabonis returns from the health and safety protocols prior to the deadline, they can keep Lance on the deal. He'd have to be inactive for games, but it still allows them to have the flexibility and have Lance on the team and be paying him and not keeping him in limbo. That seems like a win-win if the Pacers can get lucky with that timing. So they could have to have Lance on the team but inactive for a few games, but that seems preferable to not having him be on the team or being paid at all. And in theory, if they make deals earlier, who knows what could happen there. But like, you don't have to have 2 players in COVID protocols to sign one. You can only do it with one. The Heat just did this. They just added Chris Silva literally on the 31st yesterday for most of you listening. Omer Yurtseven's the only Heat player in health and safety protocols, and they signed Chris Silva to another hardship 10-day yesterday because of that. So there might be a point where Yurtseven returns and Chris Silva can't play for the Heat, but they still have him in the org through the deadline now. The Pacers could, in theory, follow that blueprint. That would be really helpful for them from a flexibility standpoint. So we'll cover that when Lance's current 10-day is done in a little more detail and how that could help them with the deadline coming up. But obviously hope the best for Sabonis. Hope he feels okay. He is vaccinated, so we'll see how his body responds and how he feels and when he can return. But from a team-building perspective, this could be a way for the Pacers to keep Lance through the deadline with absolutely zero hurdles and make that as smooth as possible for literally every party involved. That could be the small silver lining from a player entering health and safety protocols, if there's really any. I mean, you never want anyone to be in COVID protocols, but I still wanted to cover that. So let's talk about Isaiah Jackson, the story of this game. He was absolutely excellent. I mean, blew his old best performance out of the water. I mean, he deserves a ton of praise for the way he played in this game. So let's talk about how he played. But first, let's talk about two awesome groups of people. First up, the good folks over at TurboTax, because people think unusual circumstances mean complicated taxes like me, but for TurboTax live experts, that's what makes things interesting. We all have unique lives, whether you're invested in crypto for the first time this year, own an up-and-coming small business, or raising rambunctious twins. Luckily, TurboTax Live has experts who can answer your tax questions, walk you through the whole process, or do your taxes for you from start to finish. They help you get every deduction you deserve, no matter your unique situation, and you can talk to a TurboTax Live expert through your phone or computer without leaving your house. TurboTax Live experts are here to help you however you need, and if you need an extra hand your taxes off to them. They'll do it all for you. Two TurboTax Live experts, an interesting life can mean an even greater refund. Visit TurboTax.com to learn more. You do your thing. They've got your taxes. Intuit TurboTax Live. Visit TurboTax.com. Let's also talk about the good folks over at RockAuto.com. There's so many makes and models out there for vehicles these days. It's impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. You got to go in there, deal with the guy behind the counter and his annoying questioning about the exact specs of your car. They never have the parts you need. They got to order them. Then you got to go back. It's just annoying. You have a computer with access to RockAuto.com at home or in your pocket on your phone, and that'll allow you to save time and money. Why choose to spend 30%, 50%, maybe even 100% more for the same parts from that chain store or car dealership when you could get it at RockAuto.com for cheaper? They're a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. They've got reliably low prices for every customer, everything you could need for your vehicle. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto parts needs. Go to RockAuto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck, right? Locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know that you came from us. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen every single day. Why not go check out Locked On Clippers, hear their take from this game, or any of our other Locked On NBA shows for specific teams to help you get the feel for how they might be doing ahead of the trade deadline. But not speaking of the trade deadline, we'll get to that tomorrow, by the way. I have a lot of extra trade thoughts that I didn't get to share on last week's trade deadline preview show. A guy who will not be traded and looks very promising and had easily the best game of his career tonight. How about it? Mr. Isaiah Jackson. Before this game, Isaiah Jackson had never scored more than 17 points in a game. He had never rebounded more than 7 times in a game. And he smoked both of those numbers. 26 against LA, 10 rebounds. 4 of those were offensive rebounds, by the way. His defense was fantastic. If you listen to yesterday's show where we talked about that Isaiah Jackson should play every game, here's more evidence of that. I talked about his defense and a stat that a lot of scouts like to use called stocks, where they just combine steals and blocks. He had 3. That's excellent. He was just everywhere in this game. And I know a lot of people have talked about it, but I think the biggest thing he's adding offensively, and the reason he's able to wiggle free and be so efficient, is he is the vertical spacer the Pacers have not had in a long time. I mean, Gerald Green had the athleticism, but not the height or the rolling ability, and they just haven't had anyone like this in so long. And Isaiah Jackson showed why that can be valuable tonight. And the Clippers did not have Zubac, so their interior defense was a little worse than normal. A little slower with Ibaka down there and Hartenstein. But Jackson, his screening isn't that great. It doesn't matter. He is fast enough and can jump high enough that once he gets ahead of steam towards the basket, you don't even have to throw a good lob. You just throw it close to the rim as a Pacers player, and he can get it and dunk it. He had one dunk on a Levert lob that he almost had to stretch his arm behind the backboard, and he still dunked it with ease. It was insane how high he can jump. Rick Carlisle was joking after the game and talked about how, one time in the past this season he asked him, or he said, it's as if he can fly to Isaiah Jackson. Like, he just jumps with that level of force and ability. And you even see that on defense. I talked about this earlier, but part of what made this a good game for him is the no fouls. And he said in the back of his mind, once he knew, Isaiah, when he was talking post-game, that he was going to start, he would have to think about the fouling more than he has in past games, right? That's been a problem for him. Fouls has definitely been the biggest negative on his resume as a player so far. He knew he'd have to stay down, and Carlisle stressed to him, don't jump first. You can jump really high and really fast. If you jump after your matchup, you can still stop them. That's why he got 2 blocks in this game, right? So he had a few jumpy moments in the first quarter. Serge Ibaka got him on a 3-point fake. But he did a lot better in that department, especially in the post, not fouling as much as he has in the past. He moves so well defensively that he can defend pick and rolls very well, especially for his age, and his speed allows him to be a threat in transition. Like, he had one steal where he dribbled it from 3-point line to 3-point line before dishing to Duarte. Like, he has got some stuff. I don't know what it can translate to. This was one game against a team missing their best rim defender, and frankly, I didn't say this in the first segment, this was the Clippers. They had a 2-week-long road trip. This was their 8th and final game of it. I mean, they had played like 6 games in the last 8 or 9 days. I mean, this is exhausting. They're not quite a scheduled loss for them, but pretty bad. So I want to see more Isaiah, obviously, to make any grand takes or anything like that. I do have some formulating takes about Isaiah Jackson, but he was awesome in this game to the point of, like, you not find minutes for him every game, like find important role minutes for him every game where he's playing with Duarte every game, where he's playing with guys who will be on this team going forward, so you can really evaluate him. Not like the Goga evaluate minutes that I always talk about, where they should try to get Goga 5 to 10 minutes every game so they can see him play. Like, that's important too for Isaiah. That's like the bare minimum, but he's good enough that they got to find him like serious, like bench a vet kind of minutes to me, because look, I said this on yesterday's show, but Kevin Pritchard said before the season to me, they think he can play the 4 a little bit like he did at Kentucky at times. And maybe not right this second. You know, he'll have to develop that. He's definitely a more natural 5, but he can certainly run fast enough and jump high enough and put his arms in guys' faces. Like, when he gets switched on to guys, it's not that big of a problem for the Pacers because his perimeter defense is pretty good, that he could play the 4 capably because of his defense alone. And by the way, decent 3-point shooter, looking like there's a chance. I don't expect him to be more than like a 30 to 33% guy. That's good enough, given the other skills he provides. Get him in at the 4 every game. If that means benching Torrey Craig completely, I mean, that seems like a better move for the Pacers' future. Or someone on an expiring contract. Take Jeremy Lamb out of the rotation, slide Justin Holiday down a spot, slide Torrey Craig down a spot, play Isaiah at the 4 a few minutes every game. I don't know how the Pacers do it. And we already talked about this yesterday. I'm not going to rehash this completely. They have got to find him serious minutes every game. I mean, this is one performance. I don't want to overreact too much, but he also had the 15-point game against Golden State on the road, where he looked fantastic, and 7 rebounds in that game as well, and 3 steals. He had the 17-point game against Charlotte, where he shot over 50% and also had 4 rebounds and also had a steal and a block. And he had the 12-point game against Dallas over the weekend, where he also shot over 50% and had 6 rebounds. When he gets serious minutes, he contributes and does well in those games, right? To me, it seems sort of obvious that finding him more playing time is really crucial for this team, and he fits with everybody. He looks so impressive. There's just something about him that the Pacers, it's an element the Pacers haven't had with this lob threat, rim running, insane skill set and athleticism that they haven't had from, like, Miles can kind of jump that high, but it's never been functional enough for him to really put it together on an offensive situation, and none of the bigs they've had in the past can defend the perimeter the way he can. So yes, there's some cart in front of the horse stuff going on where Carlisle talked about this tonight. Right? What comes first, the chicken or the egg kind of question of what comes first, the heavy minutes that lead to a player being good or a player becoming good and then getting big minutes, right? That's the conundrum for every team, and what comes first, I think, basically depends on your situation. Are you crappy or are you good? The Pacers are crappy. Even after this win, they're 19-33. That's not a good record. Isaiah should be playing every game. They know he's kind of good now. They can develop him that way. Isaiah himself said, when I asked him after the game, like, how much I've been, playing in real NBA games helped you develop? He was like, yeah, kind of a lot. It was really a big boost for his confidence and ability. And he even said in this game, I think Scott Agnes asked him about the question. I don't remember exactly what the question was, but like, tonight was a significant progress step for him where he saw a lot of the work he's putting in, the stuff he's had to think about more with the fouls and the offensive positioning and stuff. It all kind of clicked, right? He didn't say it clicked, but we could see it. He had 26 and 10, so he was really fantastic. He got lauded from his coaches and teammates. Dwayne Washington spoke after the game, and I asked Dwayne about, who's the best? Is he the best dunker that you've ever played with, like of all these guys you've played with? And Dwayne played with Cassius Stanley in high school, and he brought up Cassius specifically, which is funny because Cassius was on the Pacers last year, but Yeah, he said one of the best two he's ever seen, in terms of that ability to fly and duck. He didn't say who his number one was, if he has anyone above Isaiah, but all these guys clearly see the impact that having that lob threat alone can have. And that's just one skill he could have. His defense is obviously good. Maybe he could be a shooter a little bit. The three ball is clearly a developing part, but he hit a bunch of threes in the G League a couple weeks ago. There is something to what he can be. I have no idea what it is. Maybe it's just this. Maybe he is just, for the rest of his career, a rim-running defense guy. And that's still a valuable bench big that you could have, or an energy big you could have. So you got to explore what he can be. You've got to try to develop his skills if you're the Pacers, because there's a very promising young guy in your rotation who just had a career game. You have to see what that can grow into. And the only caveat I'll put on it is the trade deadline is in 10 days from now. I do understand featuring guys before the deadline and building the exact team you have, if they make moves or don't, whatever. But on the 11th, when your team is basically set for the rest of the year, barring maybe a waiver or two or a conversion of a deal, Isaiah should certainly be playing every day from that point on. And this game was just step one of seeing what you have in the guy. And I think, too, it'll be good to evaluate him after bad games, right? You can really see what he struggles with and what he needs to work on more specifically. But this was a great game for him, a very impressive performance as a starter, and something he can build on. And I think, as Domas is out going forward, Goga's foot is progressing, so there's a chance he could return soon. He was questionable for this game. Isaiah might not start once Goga returns, but he should be still with Sabonis and Turner out getting some sort of serious minutes going forward, and that can really help in this evaluation process. And he could even continue to play big minutes with Chris Duarte, which for me, the data dork, will be very important to monitor as his team goes forward. I'm sure I'll have more evolving Isaiah thoughts as we continue to watch him play, but for a 22nd pick, he is certainly looking like a good player. And speaking of looking like good players, 2 rookies on 2-way contracts for the Pacers in this game just scored over 30 points combined. What's their futures look like? What can they continue to add to this team? What does the 2-way contract situation even mean? That might sound boring, but Dwayne Washington and Terry Taylor can play. You'll want to hear the thoughts about them and what their future can be in this team. But before we talk about that, let's talk about the good folks over at BetOnline, because there might be less football being played with the Super Bowl in a couple weeks. But BetOnline.net has always had way more odds and info for this playoff season, from scores, totals, player performance props, to where the next fired coach is going to land. BetOnline is the #1 spot for all things NFL betting in 2022, and it's not just football. BetOnline.net's basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC odds coverage is the best in the business. From sports right down to your favorite Vegas casino games, BetOnline is your #1 wagering destination. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports and play your favorite games. BetOnline is where the game starts. As always, thank you for making Locked On Pacers your first listen every single day. I very much appreciate that. We got our trade deadline show coming up on the Locked On Podcast Network in just a few weeks. You don't want to miss it. I'll probably have to pop in live very often for that, because Pacers might be active that day. But instead of trades, let's talk about 2 rookies, not named Isaiah Jackson, who just combined for 31 points in this game. Terry Taylor and Dwayne Washington. Dwayne Washington scoring 14 of those points in the fourth quarter, where he erupted. He hit a heat check 3 and shimmied, which he said was inspired by seeing a video of his dad playing in Spain, where his dad did a similar shimmy. It was very awesome. He was fantastic, and he has continued to look pretty good. By the way, Dwayne Washington, 2 days ago, before this game, had a career-high 22 points. Oh, by the way, 5 days before that, he scored 21 points in New Orleans. And he had 20 points against the Cavs earlier this month. That means Dwayne Washington had 3 20-point games in his first month in an NBA rotation. I don't have the exact stats in front of me because the last game is not quite in this. But Dwayne Washington, prior to tonight's game in the month of January, 40% from the field, 38% from deep, 11 points per game. And that number will go up, adding in 16 points in this game on 46% from the field and 57% from deep. That's an impressive month. That is no longer he's definitely streaky, but that's no longer a flash-in-the-pan kind of rookie. I have no idea what he can be long-term. He was very streaky at Ohio State, but he is looking like a player, and I've talked about him a lot in his role with the Pacers, but he looks good again. He always just makes these quick decisions that makes him so valuable. Sometimes the Pacers are a little too slow-paced in their processing speed of what's going on with the defense or when to attack, or they reset too much. Dwayne, catch, go. Sometimes it's bad, but a lot of the times it's good. And in this game, it was good a lot of the time. He was 6 for 13, again, 16 points, and was huge in the fourth quarter. The Clippers were up at points in the fourth. They cut it to 3 after a big Pacers run, but Dwayne was a steady hand. They kept the Pacers ahead, and he's on a two-way deal. What does that mean for his future? Before we talk about that, let's talk about Terry Taylor, the other Pacer on a two-way deal. I did not get to talk about him enough. I only did a little bit yesterday because he played over Isaiah Jackson this weekend. And as much as I'm about to say good things about Terry Taylor, he should not play ahead of Isaiah Jackson. That said, as Isaiah Jackson's backup in this game, Terry Taylor plays over 20 minutes for the first time in his career. In fact, he played over 12 minutes for the first time in his career. He's 6'5" backup center for the Pacers in this game. And I asked Tom Hankins, the Mad Ants coach, the same question earlier this season. And I asked Rick tonight, and I asked Rick, have you ever seen a rebounder better than this guy who's 6'5" or shorter? And Rick said he's not 6'5". There's no way. He's 6'9" at least because of the way he can battle on the glass and does these post moves. And Terry Taylor in the post has been excellent in his 3-game stint in the rotation, now 4 games. He's very patient. He can jump very high. His timing is excellent. His instincts are excellent around the basket. He is a stud offensive rebounder. After tonight, last night for you listening, Terry Taylor had 5 offensive rebounds in 21 minutes against the Clippers. He is now up to 11 offensive rebounds in 56 minutes. That's good for 7 offensive rebounds per 36. He's not even close to enough minutes to qualify for the league leaders leaderboards. But of the guys who are, Steven Adams is the league leader at 6 offensive rebounds per 36 minutes. Terry Taylor is 6'5" and is at 7. Obviously, the low minutes total, that's probably not quite sustainable. But in the G League, his offensive rebounding stats are insane. Terry Taylor's got something on the glass. He is just a beast on the glass. He hit a 3 in this game. He's got, again, a little bit of post touch just because he's patient after grabbing those offensive boards. He's got some skills. He moves pretty well. He can switch at the 5 because he's 6'5" and mobile. So who knows what his future is, because 6'5" post player, who knows how that can fit in or what kind of team that fits the best on. But that's something you got to explore. Unique players is something you got to figure out how they fit on your team. 15 points in this game for Terry Taylor, a career high by a mile. 8 rebounds, also a career high by 3 over what he did against OKC in the rotation earlier this week. He continues to be extremely impressive to me. He is now 13 for 20 shooting in his career. That's 65%. Combine that with rebounds and decent scoring, it's a pretty good player. Terry Taylor is very interesting to me, along with Dwayne Washington, 2 rookie 2A guys. Credit to the Pacers scouting department for getting those guys in the door, along with the good draft class that they have with Duarte and Jackson. Again, 65 points for the rookies in this game. Dwayne and Terry are on 2-way contracts. In a normal season, that limits them to 45 days or active games, whatever, with the Pacers during the course of a full season, which is not very many. Dwayne is already getting kind of close to that. I mean, he's practiced with them all the time. He stayed with them even with all the COVID stuff going on. He's played in 20 games now. But the COVID season, they originally made it 50 games last year out of 72. They kept those rules into this year. And then when COVID really hit the league hard in December, the NBA said, we're getting rid of that. No limits for 2-way guys. They can play in every game, right? So Dwayne and Terry could be with the Pacers for the rest of the season for all the Pacers care. The Pacers, in a year that they happen to have probably their best dual 2-way guys at the same time. They had Sumner. He's probably their best 2-way guy ever. But he wasn't ever paired with stud 2-way guys. Him and Ben Moore were probably before this the best pairing of 2-way guys they ever had. Maybe him and Poitras. That was a good group as well. Doesn't matter. This is a good year to have 2 good 2-way players for the Pacers because they can keep them with the team forever as much as they want. Now, there would have been a hurdle with these 2 that I wanted to mention. People have talked about keeping them long term, and I'll get to that in a second. 2-way players this year, they have no game limit, so they can play every regular season game, but they still cannot play in the playoffs. That is a change from last year that has not been updated from the NBA. So if the Pacers were right there for the play-in, maybe, they're not. Like, it doesn't really matter. They're not going to make the play-in, but just, again, to put this in perspective, they are 6.5 away from the Pistons, who are in 14th in the East. They are 5.5 away from the Pistons, who are 14th in the East, and they are 5.5 away from the Wizards in 12th, right? They are 6 away from the play-in. They're closer to the bottom of the East than the play-in. The Pacers are not going to make the playoffs. So if they were a better team, this is something they'd have to consider is, do we want Dwayne and Terry for the playoffs? We'll have to tweak our roster a little bit. So another fortunate thing for the Pacers is the year they have these two-way guys, they aren't good enough to be in the postseason, or they'll have to change deals just to convert their two-way guys. So that's a lot of words to say. The immediate future of Dwayne Washington and Terry Taylor is probably just they're with the Pacers a lot, and they make their minimum, which is half of the league minimum on the two ways. Again, stuff that doesn't really matter. They're just on the Pacers the rest of the season. That's as of right now. The trade deadline could change this. And then in the offseason, what you can do is you can give those guys a qualifying offer, which is just another two-way contract offer. Cassius Stanley got a qualifying offer last year, but the Pacers ended up rescinding it. And so they could be back on a two-way if they take it, but it also allows them to match other deals. They can negotiate. Perhaps they'll give those guys a minimum. So if they continue to impress the rest of the season, and Dwayne's getting close to already have earned this, but they could get another two-way or like a one-year minimum offer next year to be back with the team. Dwayne obviously looks like he could be something. Terry, this was his first serious game, so let's not get too far ahead of it. But his G League stats are unbelievable. I mean, he's got the Alizé stat line going on. Alizé Johnson also put up insane G League numbers. All this to say, if the Pacers want to keep those guys, it's very easy. Because of the two-way rules this year, they don't have to convert them because they're not good enough to make the playoffs, but it's very easy to keep two-way guys because they can make them restricted free agents. So those guys' futures, if the Pacers want them, it's very easy to keep them now. They still could convert them if they end up with an extra roster spot after the trades or something like that. Because another rule, and I got this wrong on this podcast earlier this season, there is no deadline to stop signing two-way guys this season. Maybe there is, but it's not the date it usually is in January. So they could say they get a roster spot later. They trade 2 guys for 1, or they trade 1 guy for 0, whatever. There's a million ways they could do that. They could convert one of those guys to a standard deal and then sign someone else to a two-way, right? They just got Jordan Bell on their G League team literally today, right? From the Golden State Warriors championship teams, from the Bulls, right? He's an NBA level guy, right? So who knows what their plans are with those guys, but they have the flexibility this season because of some change dates and because of some changed rules that will likely go back somewhat soon, maybe next season, to keep them if they want, or convert them and give them maybe like a 2-year deal on the conversion, and then you have a team option to keep him next year anyway. It's nice and easy. Who knows? The Pacers, though, the takeaway you should have is if they want to keep Dwayne Washington and Terry Taylor in next season, they can very easily do it. Very easily. There is very little restriction unless some team offers them some absurd deal. But they're coming off of 2-way deals. I would say there's no concern there, but the big thing for the Pacers, they can keep them, and they might kind of be good, which is important because they're rookies. We'll have to see. They are two-way guys. They clearly have limitations. They had a nice game, though, and they have deserved talk about their future and what they can be for this team. That was a lot today. I talked a lot about rookies in this game and Lance, and it was a lot to get to on the show. Hope you guys all enjoyed it. Tomorrow, I don't want to spill too much, but the title of the show is going to be How the Pacers Can Get Creative at the Trade Deadline. I have lots of key points I want to discuss with the deadline on how the Pacers can do stuff that isn't just trading. They're obviously available vets for other stuff. That stuff I've talked about and you can get anywhere. I'm going to give you information you can't get anywhere else. It should be awesome. You got to tune in for it. Hope you guys enjoyed listening. You can follow me at TEastNBA on Twitter or the show at Locked On Pacers. Thank you as always for listening every single day, and we will see you tomorrow.